Hey everybody, welcome to a new tutorial. Today we're going to be talking about Composite. We went in studio and did a 3-light setup for you guys, and now I am going to walk you through how to make a super radical composite from this. As always, before we get started, I want to jump into Raw and give you guys a couple of quick tips about some stuff that I did to this, so let's give that a look. Okay, a couple cool things that I do actually want to go over. I've gone over the sharpening stuff before, so I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on this, but do spend a little bit of time in here. And remember, if you hold that Alt or Option key, especially in the masking area, it's going to give you an idea of what you're masking in. One of the things I wanted to actually show you guys for this particular one was under the effects area right here. The dehaze is a really cool tool. When I brought this in, there was just a little bit of haze. You can kind of see it. It's not crazy. But because we have those lights pointed semi at the camera, there's a little bit of flare and haze being created. So I think I had this just up to like around, just find a place that looks good. That looks good to me, like right around 15. And that just kind of takes out that little bit of flare that was there, and also crisps it up just a little bit. Other than that, there wasn't a whole lot of changes I did, but one of the things I wanted to show you is, because I'm using multiple images on this, to save all of the settings out from this one, there is kind of a cool trick to that. So if you come up here where these 3 little lines are, and you click, it says basic, and then you move over to these lines, you can go down to save settings. And it's going to ask you what you want to save. I typically save everything, but obviously if you don't want a certain part of it saved, you can just uncheck it. Then you click save, and then it's going to ask you to name it. So we're going to call this Composite Color. Let's just call it that. Doesn't really matter. We're going to click save, and then we're going to click OK. So since we've done all the legwork on that one, it doesn't really make sense to do it again. So now when I bring in my other images, which I'm actually just going to tab over to the next one, this is the image that we shot for the goggles. So I'm just going to double click on this, which is a smart object. And then I'm going to go back up into those bars, and I'm going to load settings. Now, usually it'll drop it up here. Let's see. Yeah, here's an apply preset. If you don't have a ton of them, it'll show up right here. So here's the one I want, composite color. So click it, and voila, there, everything is set up, all the dehaze, the sharpen, everything. So when we drag it over, it's going to make it super clean. And I have one more image that we're going to do that to, so I'm just going to go to the next one. And I'm hitting Control Tab to move between, because I'm in full screen mode so you guys can see. So we're going to open this one up. I'm going to go back into here, go into my presets, and do composite color. Boom, there it is. Done and done. Okay, and the next section, I'm going to hop in and show you how to stack these all up, and then I am going to show you how to turn these into smart objects since I have them that way. All right, I hopped out of full screen mode for just a second. I wanted to show you guys a couple other cool tips before we get all the way in. The first thing I want to talk about, because I feel like not everybody's talking about it these days, is how to make these into smart objects so you can reopen them. And I'm going to double click on our main one here so you can see. And the crazy part about this is down here in the very bottom, where it says Adobe RGB and all this jazz, there's a lot of really interesting things that I feel like people don't really show you. For one, whether you want to open it as a 16-bit or an 8-bit, there is a lot of videos on whether you should do 16 versus 18 or versus 8-bit, and I'm kind of on the fence, to be honest with you, but that's for a different tutorial. But then down here in this Photoshop section, it says open in Photoshop as a smart object. That is one thing I do highly recommend doing. Because that way you can jump back in, you can change colors. Yeah, you got to be a little careful with it, but it does give you a lot more control, especially on the onset of when you're opening the file up. So I'm going to click OK there. We can go into that at a different time, but that is how I got these to open as smart objects. Now, the next thing I'm going to show you is I need all three of these files in the same tab. And so I brought these over, and when you click over here, if you grab this and just move it, you can see it's kind of all over the place. It just moves where you end up dragging it. So I'm going to undo that. But the cleaner way to do that is to grab this and hold the shift key on your computer. So I'm grabbing this, I'm going to hold my shift key, and then I'm going to let it go. And if you notice, it's going to line it up a whole lot better in the frame. And he moved around a little bit because he's a human being, but this will make it a lot quicker for us to get these aligned once we're ready to do that. Then I'm going to go over to this one as well. I'm going to drag it right on top. And there we go. We've got all three in. And since we are super proficient here, we are going to name this as right reflection. And, oh, sorry, wrong one. Left reflection. And then we're going to call this one right reflection. Okay, so that's a quick know-how on how to set these up as smart objects and then bring them over a little bit more aligned than you would normally get them. All right, I think we're just about ready to roll here. And I have kind of simplified everything. I took that stuff off the screen so you guys can see this a little bit better. And I did a little bit of cleanup work. I'm going to show you that really quick. There's before, there's after. That kind of stuff, I don't want to waste your time you watching me do that. I am going to do the pathing now. And in case you've never done pathing before, I did a tutorial on the pen tool. Check that out if you haven't done that before you move on with this guy. So I'm going to hop in, get super tight, and path this whole thing out. I'm also going to path out the goggles because we need that for when we put in the reflections. Now you might be asking yourself, Aaron, why the heck didn't you auto-align these layers before you got going? Well, I like to keep everything as smart objects until I'm ready to change them. And you can't auto-align smart objects. Plus, we're going to be kind of warping these goggles a little bit to make sure everything fits correctly. So I'm not super worried about that. And like I showed you before, we can just shift and drag and they're lined up pretty well, enough for me anyways. So I'm going to get to pathing. We'll jump this bad boy into warp speed. I'll play some solid music for you and I will be back in just a second. Okay, path is looking good. Now I am going to go back in to warp speed and I'm going to path out these goggles. Now, sometimes I would say to go ahead and path out these little details here, but in this case, because I'm bringing in the whole piece, I'm just going to path out around the lenses. So I'll get in super tight and do one more path. We'll go back into it. Here comes your music. Okay, there is our brand spanking new path for the goggles, which we will actually end up using a little bit later. One of the things I want to touch on real quick is I did create a new path for that. So you might have seen me name the other one model. and then I opened up a new path called goggles. Let me just bring this over here so you can see. So now we have two separate paths, one for the model and one for the goggles. Let's get cracking on this photo. Whoa, we are pathed out, we are masked up, and we're going to start putting this bad boy together. Now, if you're just like, hey Aaron, what the heck just happened? Well, you can check out my tutorial on turning a path into a mask, and that'll get you going on that. But all we did was take the path that we just made, we feathered it by 0.5 pixels, which is my preferred feather, and then we put a mask on here, this group. Now, what I want to show you real quickly is this idea of a 3-light setup is that you can kind of drop it into anything. Because we have some really nice shape on the model, we can put really all kinds of stuff behind it, and it looks pretty cool. So I brought in some different backgrounds. Some of them are a little crazy, but I just wanted you guys to see. So if you had something like clouds, or the classic brick wall, or these are some stars that I got off of NASA. I mean, if we played with that, we could make that really awesome. I think I'm going to go for something a little more realistic today, and I found this guy. On a side note, this is just something I had laying around from another shoot. I think I was just walking around with my camera. As a composite photographer, you should have a library of things that you can use. Make sure if you're just pulling textures and that kind of stuff, make sure they're royalty free. But these are all things that I had that I shot, and I can pull them out for anything. So like I said, in this case, we're going to go with this one. But before we get too crazy, I want to go in and get those goggles all squared away. So I'm going to move on to the next video, but I just wanted to show you guys that that's the point of this. We can take this image and now put it in a whole bunch of different locations, and it looks really realistic. So our final composite is going to be really awesome. And whether you want it to be super fantasy or just kind of gritty street and whatever you want it to be, this lighting is really dynamic that way. You can make it a little softer if you don't want it quite so crunchy, but it's really fun. And that's a nice thing about these 3-light setups is now we can grab this, we can start moving it around, using our imaginations, and putting together some cool composites. Let's get started on these goggles, but before we do, I have had a change of heart. I think I just must be a sucker for these crazy composites, but I think we're going to do stars today. I am really feeling these stars. I think they look awesome. So let's roll with these guys. I mean, this looks more realistic, but nah, who wants to do realistic? Okay, let's do this guy. I'm going to delete this one. We're just going to go with some stars. Now I want to get it situated on the goggle situation here. So we have two sets of goggles, right? We have the right reflection and the left reflection. So what in the heck fire were we going to do? Well, first we're going to load our goggle selection. And you can see they don't look lined up at all. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually turn that into a mask for each one of those goggles. So I'm just going to Alt Option drag the mask up to the other one. And now you can see this mask is, it's going to be really hard, which we'll kind of feather it out here in just a second. But man, that looks good. So let's go back to this and take a look. Now what we can do that will get us lined up to start with is disconnect the actual layer or image from the mask itself. So there's this little link icon, click on that and it goes away. That means now if I move this, it's not going to move the actual mask itself. So I'm going to grab this and just kind of move it over. And we're pretty close. Wow. Yeah, that looks great. I think we might need to do a little adjustment on the rotation, but that actually looks pretty cool. So we'll get in there and clean that up a little bit, but man, we are really close to where we want to be. And I think what we really need to do is just give it a little rotation. See where we're at. That looks pretty good. Let's start there. Yeah, I'm okay with that. And now we're going to go ahead and do the same thing just on the other side. So let's get this guy, oops, I'm going to move this one, not the other one. Get this guy a little more lined up. Yeah, and you can see that's definitely a rotation thing. So I'm going to grab this one. Try to stay zoomed if you can, and we're just going to rotate it till it looks a little more correct. That's pretty good. Let's see what we got here. Yeah, I'm okay with that. Awesome. Okay, so we've got a little bit of something to deal with here, but it's not bad, and I think we're going to be able to get this done pretty quick. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to rasterize both of these layers. Now, we're in a good spot as far as color and everything goes. So I'm going to right-click on here, and you'll see this rasterized layer, and that just means to turn it into pixels. Because when it's a smart object, it's actually got like all this mathematical jazz going on. So it'll make your files super big, but it also makes it really easy to make changes and resize. Once you're done resizing stuff, then is the good time to look at rasterizing your layer. So we're pretty close here. And what I'm going to start to do now is I'm going to mask out the other half. So I'm going to grab my brush, and I just want to get one side lined up. We don't need to go crazy with the rest of it. So I'm going to turn it to a nice soft brush, and I'm going to do 100% opacity. And I'm going to brush with black and just kind of get it out of this side. And you can start to see, whoa, whoa, whoa. It's already looking gorgeous. So that kind of masked in a little bit. And I think we're going to probably end up going to dark. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Yeah, see, that looks pretty cool. If we go a little bit dark in the middle, I think, ooh, yeah, we just need to darken up that middle just a little bit. And you can see that's really starting to come together there. I'm liking that quite a bit. Okay. Now let's get this bad boy finessed in here, because we are a little bit off. And what I'm going to do to make our lives a million times easier is I'm actually going to just select the area of the goggles, which is right here. And I'm going to jump it up, and I'm going to apply the same layer. So that way when I'm rotating and warping, I don't have as much area to work with. So let's start with this side first. And I want to look at this. Yeah, I want this all gone. So I'm going to double check my mask really quick and just get everything gone on this side, because we do not need that. This is for my left, and I'm going to call this left. Okay, so we're pretty close. Let's move this around just a little bit. And I think what needs to happen is it just needs to get a little, oh, hello there. Sorry about that. That was a little crazy. It just needs to get a little bit bigger. Like right there, I'd say. Okay. Oh. And then we'll warp this edge down just a little bit. So I'm control or command clicking down here, and I'm just going to bend it out just a little bit. And that looks pretty good to me. Yeah, that's great. Okay. So I would say for the most part, we might need to do a little bit of cleanup work here. We'll get in a little tighter. We'll do that later. That looks pretty good. I'm a fan of where we're at with this. So that side looks pretty finessed in. So let's swing over to this side now. I'm going to delete this left reflection one just so we don't get confused. We can always grab it again if we needed to, but I think we're okay for now. So I'm going to check this, make sure there's no random stuff going on, and there is. Let's kill that. And let's hop back over here and give this a look. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to grab this. We're going to lasso it out. I'm going to jump it up there. I'm going to move the mask up to it, and I'm just going to delete this layer. Now, the reason I'm doing this is a couple things. First of all, it's going to make my file size a whole lot smaller and easier to work with. You could stay in with smart objects and try and warp them around, but man, warping smart objects and things like that can just get totally out of hand, especially when you're getting up there in file size. So let's hop onto this one. We're going to name it, we'll call it right, just so we know what we're doing. And now I'm going to move this around just a little bit and get it all finessed in here. Okay, so we got that bottom part, and I think we just need to kind of make this a little taller. That looks pretty good. And let's do the same thing and warp down just a little bit. That looks awesome. So I'm a fan of these goggles. We might need to do a little bit more work and I'll finesse it around, but you can see now we have these gradients. I'm going to show you before and after. So here's our before and here's our after, and that is just popping. Now it looks way better. And again, like I said in the video while we were shooting, your manufacturer, your client, they're going to want this because they work really hard to get these sweet colors, and this is what people buy. So we're even going to go a little bit further a little later on, and we're going to pop that out, make it look even cooler. But that is the quick way of getting that in. You just get them moved up, you unlink those masks, move them around, use your paths, and you are good to go. So let's start getting this guy finessed into place. Goggles are looking good. I did just a small amount of cleanup work. I mean, they were pretty in there, so we're good on that front. I'm loving the way those look. Then what I went ahead and did was I just brought everything into this model group just to keep everything clean because it can be inside of that mask. So now we have our goggles and everything inside of one group, and we're ready to start playing a little bit more, which is my personal favorite part. I'm not going to take too much time on this because you can literally do this for hours, and I'd say it's one of the bigger parts of composites is deciding when you're actually done. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of contrast to the background. Now you could do this a couple of different ways, but because we are in a smart object still, I'm just going to throw a level adjustment on there. So I'm going to hit Command or Control L while select on that layer, and it's going to bring up my levels. I think for this, I just want the black to go a little blacker to give it a little more grit, and then I'm going to push those highlights up a little bit too. So that looks fine to me. Now, this is the cool thing about smart objects as well, is that you see down here, this is a smart filter, and it's a levels adjustment, and I can actually turn this on and off if I want to. So if you decide you don't want it later on, just shut it off. No big deal. The other thing I want to do is I want some kind of flare gradient coming out of the top. So I'm going to bring over and drop a curves layer on the very top. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pull the black point up a little bit. And then I'm going to push those mid highlights up a little. I like the way that's looking. Yeah, that looks pretty cool. So now that we have that adjustment made, I'm going to pull that off so you guys can see. I'm going to throw a little gradient mask on there. Yeah, I kind of like that. Just kind of push it into the helmet just a little bit. Let's see. We might even just be able to do a regular gradient, not circular. Let's see. Nah, circle's better. All right, let's do a circular gradient. We'll throw it right up here. Get a little bit on the helmet. Let's see. That looks awesome. There's our before and our after. Just a little bit of light pushed in on that side. I think that looks really cool. The other thing I think that would be fun to do is throw some kind of green smoke around the front, since we've got this really cool green smoke in the back. So let's go ahead and grab some of that green out of the background and bring it into the front. So I'm just going to do a new layer. I'm going to call it smoke. And we're going to use a brush for this one. I have a smoke brush that I love. It's by Cursed. It's called Cursed Smoke Brush. So if you guys are interested, I'll try to throw the link up for this one. So I'm just going to grab that brush, and then I'm going to find a nice bright green. I like that. We'll paint it 100% to start, just to kind of get some cool colors going in there. I like that. And then let's do a little bit of red as well. Let's get some deep reds in there. That looks awesome. There we go. That looks good. Now, the key to smoke is to really finesse the masks, because smoke has so many layers, and what I would do is just go in there and kind of start to finesse out the reds and the greens and get them into a good place. This is a little heavy-handed down here, one over here. We just want it to blend. We don't want to go crazy. Pull a little Bob Ross, do some happy smoke on here. That's awesome. Love it. And then one of the other cool things that you can do, I want to get this out of the middle for sure. That's feeling pretty good now. One of the other cool things you can do is actually drop a curves layer on here. And what we'll do is I'm going to make a curves layer. You'll see it pop up right here. And I'm going to clip it to the smoke. So you see I'm holding Alt or Option. And I'm just clicking when you see that little arrow. And you'll see now it's got this arrow and it's hooked to it. So what I can do is I can actually push the brightness of the smoke. And that's pretty good. Then I'm going to invert my mask so it's not anywhere. And now I'm going to paint it on with the smoke brush. So you can see now we have some cool highlights within the smoke and it's not everywhere. So here's your before and your after. And that's really cool to kind of help blend things in. I'm already liking the way that this is looking. Okay, so we're getting close. We added a little smoke. We changed the levels of the background, and we are going to get moving on some special effects. Let me pull some in here for you. We're already into a pretty long tutorial here, so I'm going to like burn through this last part, but I'm going to try and be as thorough as I can without taking up a ton more time. So this is where we are right now, and it's just got, I mean, this is the basic. This isn't even the smoke. The one thing I did down here is I added this. This is from Lens Distortions. It's a light hit, and I just put it right behind him. And I thought that kind of blended the background a little bit nicer. You could do this on your own too by just throwing a gradient with like the black point raised up back there and coloring it a little bit. But I thought that was a nice kind of touch. So the other stuff that I did, and it's a lot, is this. And I really like the way this looks. It's a little over dramatic, and I'll probably end up backing it off for the final. But let's talk through what I did really fast. So you guys have already seen, I'm going to come all the way back down to where you guys have seen, and that is the smoke. So the smoke's all finessed in. I showed you guys how to add highlights to that. Then I just brightened up the center of the image right around where his face and helmet is. And that's something I tend to do. I also went in and did a little dodging and burning and contrast on him, which just looked like this. I've shown you guys how to do all this stuff in other tutorials. That one light portrait, I talked about the dodging and burning and the contrast layer, which I'm going to do at the top too. So I'll show you in just a second. So we did the smoke, we added the highlights, and then we put this kind of gradient highlight just over the front to make him pop a little bit more. Then I used Topaz Adjust. I've talked about them before. This whole filter is like $50, well worth the money. They do not sponsor me or anything, so this is not like some kind of shameless plug. But that clarity you can see just pops in. Now I end up painting it on, so let me show you really quick what I do. To get it onto its own layer, you just merge everything to the top. So for me, that's Command-Alt-Shift-E or Control-Alt-Shift-E. And then you're going to go into Filter, Topaz Labs, and then pop it into the Vibrant collection over here on your left. And then there's Clarity. And you can see how the clarity just puts in this awesome, I mean, you could leave it like that if you really like that super, almost HDR-y, gritty look. But what I do is I apply that filter, and it takes just a second. It's a pretty big image. And I actually will drop the opacity of the layer down to like 75. And then I'll put a mask on it. And I'm just going to paint it in where I think it looks good. So that's what you can see I did here. I just kind of painted it over the front. And in this case, because there's not a lot of skin, you can kind of go a little bit crazier than normal. But that's how I add that clarity layer. So that's that. The next thing I do is contrast. Oops, spelled that one wrong. Contrast. And here's how I do contrast. I am actually going to add a black and white layer. So let me bring this over so you guys can see. And it's this guy right here, black and white. So you hit that. And this is what's cool about it. Now you have all your colors, and you can just kind of drag until it looks good. I pulled up the reds a little bit because that's really making the sky and his jersey pop. And, you know, just play around with what looks good. Then once you feel like the contrast looks good in black and white, flip that bad boy over to soft light. And look at that contrast. I love it. It's one of the more controllable ones. It's also pretty dramatic. And then just dial it to taste. So bring it down. I mean, usually we're going to be in like I'm usually in the 25% area, but for this one, I kind of like the, I don't know, 50% looks pretty hot to me. Deal. Let me grab this off so you guys can see now. So that's our contrast layer. Let me turn mine back on here. There we go. Then I went back in and added a little bit of this dramatic, and this is also a topaz one in the same area. So again, I'm merge everything up to the top, and I'm going to go into topaz adjust 5, and then I am going to do dramatic, and you can see dramatic kind of gives it this flary, highlighty look. On its own, I think it's way too heavy-handed, but this is backed all the way off to 15%, so it's just kind of popping the highlights and giving it this little flare, which I like. Then the last thing I do, and I do this on a lot of composites, is I will put a toned layer on the top, and that's to help bring everything together so it looks like it's in the same color palette, and you can just see that cerulean kind of drops it in. And I don't know, it looks good already. I think I might end up leaving it without the cerulean layer. Yeah, let's leave it without. I don't know, I don't think I love it as much. I like that kind of poppy vibe. So I'm going to delete that one actually, but a lot of times I'll end up doing a toned layer. These colors look really good together. The last thing you might think about doing is darkening the bottom a little bit. And this one, I don't even know that it needs it. But let's try this. Let's throw a vignette on there. I think that might be a really good idea. So I'm actually going to delete this one. That was the one I was showing you dramatic on. And I'm going to delete this one because that was the one I was showing you contrast on. Now I'm going to do a vignette. And here's a cool way to do a vignette. And then we're going to be done because I am, whoa, long tutorial here. I'm going to grab my lasso tool and then I'm going to circle around kind of where I want the vignette to be. Let's say right there. And you don't have to be super crazy with it. And then I'm going to go, and you can do Shift F6, but for this I'm going to show you. So select, modify, and then feather. So Shift F6 will get you there a lot quicker. And you're going to do something crazy like 250 pixels, let's call it. Now we got this really nice soft. Now we need to invert this because we want to apply it to the outside. So hit Command Shift I or Control Shift I, and now you'll see the outside selected. Now I'm going to grab a curves. So I'm going to show this to you really quick. There's my curves layer. And you'll see my mask now has this really cool feather. And what I can do is just kind of drag it down. Ooh, that's good. Drag it down a little bit and give him a little vignette. Pop some attention in there. Okay, I think we are done. We're going to call it done. Like I said, you can play for hours, but I am liking the way this looks. If I take you all the way back to the very, very beginning of where we are, holy smokes. Let's shut this off, turn this off, and look at this. This is where we started, guys. Whoa. Just whoa. So let's turn all this stuff back on, and that's where we are. Whoa, guys, thanks for hanging in there with me. This was really awesome. I am really stoked with how we turned out on this image. Make sure you obviously have checked out the video on the 3-light tutorial we did in the studio so you know how the heck we got this picture to begin with. And hit that subscribe button, click the like. We love having you guys around. We'll be doing some more stuff soon. I'm going to do some more entailed tutorials on how to make smoke and light and all this kind of jazz. But thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, be awesome.